States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Russell, could we have the roll call, please?
Councilor Assad?
Here.
Councilor Hearn?
Here.
Councilor Stone?
Here.
Mr. Mayor Dameron?
Here.
Councilor Zulo?
Here.
Councilor Kier?
Here.
Councilor Kowalski?
Here.
Councilor Pope? Mayor Lovett.
I'm here.
Okay,
Next on the agenda is citizens forum. Is there anybody from the audience who would like to speak on a non-agenda item? There is none, so we'll move on to the business of the evening. We decided to call this, as you will recall, we were supposed to have a joint meeting with the school board. I believe it was originally November 15th, and then we asked about a later date, and the school board's response was they're tied up in a lot of different things. They prefer to meet in January. But that does not resolve the issue of what we wanted to do, which was meet with our legislative representatives so we could relate to them our legislative priorities before the deadline of submitting LSRs, which is December 3rd. So after we agreed to have the meeting tonight, I contacted all of the representatives. Representative Cloutier is supposed to be here tonight. He said he would be here. Senator Hennessy had another obligation this evening. She could not be here. And, of course, we have soon-to-be Representative O'Hearn. He's already here. And I don't have a response from soon-to-be Representative Stapleton. So whoever cannot be here will relay the notes. And
You didn't introduce him.
oh, I'm sorry, because he's here. So over here, sorry, soon-to-be Representative Merchant. He was able to make it, and because he was the only one here right now, I failed to introduce you. I'm so sorry. Representative Cloutier is walking in right now, so.
If it's only the three reps, do you want to take my seat and I'll sit over there so that it makes and then John could take Scott's seat because Scott's not coming.
No, that's fine. It's fine. So, Representative Cloutier, if you could just join your colleague, that would be great. So while you're doing that, I'll just go over the purpose of tonight. So the purpose of tonight is to, one, consolidate all of the information that we've had to date with what the council has done. And in the past with regard to legislative priorities, what their status is, and ensure that everybody has the same information, and then provide guidance to our representatives. Good evening, soon-to-be Representative Stapleton. Could you sit next to Councilor Kloss?
Sorry about making you sit next to me, but
share the information and then provide guidance to our representatives. Because once the session starts in January, things go pretty fast, and it's better that they are aware of what we consider our priorities to be from our perspective. Also, we have one item which is a suggested change to current statute, and that is an opportunity for us to request that the LSR be submitted before the deadline. So the first item, what I'd like to do is, in your packet, you had a review of the 2018 legislative session, and those six, I believe there's 6 items in bold, are ones that we would like somehow to have our representatives revisit, or at least share our position and why we're at that position. So if it's okay, I'd just like to start with that list in bold. SB 193, also referred to as the Freedom Savings Account. We had submitted a letter in opposition. The bill was passed by the Senate. The House voted to conduct an interim study. An interim study report recommended bill for future legislation. So the issue here is it's about 2 things, really. It's about school choice, but the way the bill has been written to date, it was about taking money that would have gone into funding public education and shifting it over to private school entities. So obviously, the community here in Claremont supports school choice because we have a number of schools in addition to the public Claremont School District. However, we all, I think, are pretty familiar with the issues with regard to our lack of and dwindling state support for public education. So I want to give everybody on the council a chance to voice their thoughts on this, and then we'll close and go on to the next item. We have to be done by 6:55 because we have another meeting. This was meant to go along rather quickly, but who would like to speak to either school choice or public funding of public education? Yes.
Yeah, I think I'd just add my voice that taking anything away from public education funding, anything of the per pupil allotment from the state of New Hampshire, is really misguided. There seems to be the thought that if you remove a student, then magically somehow $500 appears extra within the money for the school from the state, and that's just not true. You can't look at it that simplistically. And so I'm going to add my strong voice. I'd continue to urge whatever gets brought up or got before you for any kind of vote. I would certainly urge that your vote be in opposition to that.
Anybody else? Yes, Councilor Stone.
In regards to the school choice, I really don't like the idea of parents being hit twice for providing their children with an opportunity to go to a private school. Most of these parents are, both working family members, and if they choose to send their child to a private school, whether it be religious-based or for whatever reasons, I don't like the idea of them getting hit with also the same tax rate as the others. Mm-hmm. And I don't have a problem with the tax credit being given back to them if, in fact, they do send their children to a private school.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else on this?
I would just echo what I think Alan said. We have such a hard time with school funding right now, and it puts a huge burden on the city, what we're able to use for functioning at the city, that I don't agree with the idea of taking funding from public schools to private.
Okay. So last week I did a review of all of the LSRs that have been submitted to date. It may have had new LSRs added to the list, but when I checked last week, it was about 340 LSRs that had been submitted. About 10 of them directly deal with school funding. So I know this will be a hot topic this legislative session. I think you're well aware from the letters that you received that the continual decrease in the stabilization grants is really hurting the school district, and it's hurting the community as a whole. I think also there was a great article in today's Eagle Times about the cost of special ed, and I would encourage everybody to read that, because it clearly outlines that the federal government is not supporting special ed in a way that met their commitment when special ed was first stood up. And because they are not living up to that commitment, then it's putting even more pressure at the state level and the local level. So I would suggest collectively, after you've been sworn in, that we provide you a joint letter from the school board and the city council, but even more than that, we go to the federal delegation and say, you guys, I don't know what the other states are dealing with. Here in New Hampshire, this is not a issue that is unique to Claremont. So it's got to be hurting other parts of the state, and I can't say it any better than what this article did about the importance of special ed being available in a way that makes a difference in kids' lives so that they can be a contributing part of society. And without the federal support, we just don't have the resources at the state or local level to do that. So I think it has to be a two-pronged approach at the state level. I think we would ask that you represent us in a way, what I'm hearing from the council, that any continued decrease in funding public education is just hurting entire communities. And that we also have a concerted and united effort to deal with the federal delegation. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah. Madam Mayor, members of the council, just to update you, according to House calendar, Senate Bill 193 was put into interim study, and a majority of the House Finance Committee have recommended it for future legislation next term. So I suspect a bill will be filed, and there's going to be another battle. I think the governor will be strongly in favor of it, but I don't know how far it's going to get because obviously the I don't without because of the elections, the composition of both houses has changed. I think it's going to be an uphill fight for it, regardless of what the governor thinks. So that bill, a similar bill to Senate Bill 193, will be filed, I think, next term.
And as you've heard from some members of the council, it's not that we're against school choice. I mean, this community clearly demonstrates that with all the different schools that we have. But it can't be at the detriment of the public education system, because what do those students do? We have to get students ready for life.
And believe me, Madam Mayor, I've heard on both sides constituents and I can see the arguments of the opponents, but I also see that will hurt public education and, just increase property taxes, increase the burden. And that's one of my major objections to this bill.
Is there a way that you would recommend that we approach the federal delegation so that they can do their part as far as advocating at the federal level, that the federal government has to support us more in special ed?
I think just writing a letter maybe, or whenever they come to Claremont, they seem to like, at least our delegation has been pretty good in the last year or two of coming to Claremont, and maybe you got to hit them then, and just advocate for them. And frankly, 2 years ago during the presidential primary, I even talked to the presidential candidates about this, because I think having the presidential leadership and the fact that we need to fully fund special education is only 20% now. It's supposed to be by law 40%, which I'd like to see it at least 80, if not 100%, but at least 40%, as the law was written nearly over 40 years ago, was intended. It's never been fully funded. And it was, in fact, former Congressman Charlie Bass who led the effort to raise it, and he was somewhat successful working in a bipartisan manner. So I would assume that our delegation, if you approached them, I'd be happy to facilitate that. But I think a letter to the delegation, all three members, Congresswoman Custer, Senator Shaheen, and Hassan, urging them to do all they can. And then maybe we need to follow up. If I see them, next time I will see them personally, I will bring it up, or a member of their staff. But every time they come to Claremont, somebody from the city council, the school board, ought to be advocating for more money, federal funding for special ed. That would be my suggestion.
Okay. So if I'm understanding you correctly, we should provide you a joint letter, and then I think that letter should also go to the entire state, our Sullivan County delegation, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then you'll add your own.
Right.
Okay.
The other opportunity is, in a matter of a few months, we're going to have lots of candidates coming through our towns, respectively, at the national level because of the presidential primary. It's another time for people on the city council and us collectively to voice that concern so that they hear it not just from one or two, but from us collectively.
Okay.
When I say collectively, it's not just the city here, but also I think it's important for us to get a hold of other SAUs so that they hear it throughout the state, not just from a community, but several communities as they travel through our beautiful state.
Okay. All right.
Question?
Yes.
Do we know that every dollar that goes by school choice into a private institution detracts directly from public? The reason I ask that is because sometimes there can be a great deal of space between those two opposite goals. I've heard that there has work been done on the stabilization grant, to be presented within the next legislative session that maybe is a more direct remedy to our problems with insufficient funding here in Claremont and on the other weak towns that were part of the Claremont lawsuit. Don't know any further detail. Still trying to feel my way through a new environment here. But that I got my ears open for anything that helps Claremont education, and that is something I picked up and will be looking into further.
What I do know is that an LSR has been submitted about the stabilization grants, but the LSRs don't provide any details about what the text would be, so I have no idea what the proposal is.
Now, maybe we can find something out. Tomorrow I'm going to Concord, and we've got orientation for 2.5 days, so I can snoop around, listen around, and see what I can glean from that.
There was an LSR submitted that is talking about repealing the funding for kindergarten. So you'll see LSRs in support of public funding as well as repealing public funding. So I guess the takeaway from this body is this community can't afford that. And we need to pressure our federal delegation to provide the federal support that's been outlined in statute. So are we ready to move on beyond school funding? Okay. Next is the retirement. In your packet, I erroneously put SB. It should be HB 413, and that has to do with the New Hampshire retirement system. If the council recalls, some of you were not on the council at the time, but we did have a fantastic presentation from Barbara Reed of NHMA on the retirement system. Several years ago, the state, in a nutshell, the state used to provide some support to the New Hampshire retirement system that had been lowered incrementally to now it's zero. So we have a state retirement system that basically we don't have any control on the interest rate that's set and all of that. Yet we're told we have to provide 100% of the employer's portion of the retirement. That has cost this, the city quite a bit of money because there used to be some support from the state. It has cost the school district quite a bit of amount of money. Collectively, it has impacted the entire community. At the last session, it lost by a narrow margin, and when there was a vote taken to reconsider, it was lost by 1 vote. Assistant Mayor Dameron?
Not only has it impacted our community, this is an area that impacts negatively the entire state, every school district and municipality in the state of New Hampshire. So we believe, and I strongly believe, that there ought to be in the legislature some kind of support for your own community, whoever you are, Mr. or Mrs. Legislator, to do something regarding state contributions to the retirement system. Personally, I don't really care if the percentage is 5%, 15%, 6%. I don't care what, but make a start. But once you get started and make the case, then it's easier to go on in the future, and people know and can see the benefit that that's going to have. So I would urge you to start. It's got a statewide impact.
Any thoughts? For those that are new to, will be new to the legislature, I don't remember the meeting, council meeting, where Barbara Reed made that presentation, but it's an excellent tutorial on
It had to have been the end of the year because I was there for it.
at the end of last year.
Yeah, so it
Okay.
was sometime after September.
I think it was in January, wasn't it?
Yeah, because
Maybe.
We were here for
we were
that.
here for that.
We were,
Oh, you
Yeah.
were here for that?
Yes.
Okay, so it was January. So if you kind of look around, she did an excellent job.
And not to say, there is another bill into the successor to House Bill 413. I am a co-sponsor, and its prime sponsor is Hampton Representative Rennie Cushing again.
Oh, okay.
And he's assembling a bipartisan coalition of sponsors. We nearly achieved it, but we lost by one vote on the House floor, one of the most frustrating defeats. Even though Representative Cushing and I got up on the House floor, I spoke to your letter, the letter that you sent the entire legislature, but unfortunately it got tied up in politics, partisan politics, but Rennie learned a lot, and he was a yeoman's effort that what he did to get it out of the House and over to the Senate with some help from outgoing State Representative Ray Gagnon, too. So we hope to achieve some sort of relief next year. It may only be 5%. I mean, Rennie's willing to compromise, but I'd like to have it go as far as Rennie can push it.
So what would you need from us?
I think, again, continuing letters to the legislature. Once the bill is filed, it will be brought to a public hearing. I'm not sure exactly which committee. I'm going to assume, for the sake of arguments, the same committee. It started out with the House Executive Departments and Administration Committee. Go there, and then if we approve it, then it probably have to be sent to Finance for further review because it has financial implications on the budget. The other thing is, since next year is a budget year, it's possible it could be put into the budget as any finalized agreement as well. So in the end, maybe we really wouldn't need the bill, but the policy in the bill will be part of next year's operating budget, assuming we can come to a deal with the Senate and the governor. But it doesn't hurt to push it, because if it fails in the budget, we can always push it in 2020. Okay. So believe me, I am on board to help Representative Cushing all I can to try to get this bill passed in some form for next term.
Okay. So an updated letter from us and the school
Right,
board
absolutely.
would probably
Whatever, and encourage, hopefully all the other municipalities will do the same thing, because this is one issue we can unite on. We're all affected, regardless of our school districts. All our municipalities are infected.
Okay. Anything else from the council on this item? Okay. Next one was HB 525, stabilization grants. We've already talked about that. So we'll move on, if that's okay, to the two bills that related to energy. So in reviewing the LSRs, there are more LSRs on energy than there are on school funding, so that is going to be a hot topic. Just to bring you guys up to date with what we've done in the city, we established an energy advisory committee. We are looking at, they are going to be providing a recommendation to the council as far as, do we want to adopt a policy that is renewable energy, related to renewable energy, and do we want it to be a goal for the entire community or for municipally owned buildings? So that has yet to be ironed out, but I think we've heard, as a council, we've heard from a lot of people in the community who are very much into renewable energy and would like to see more support in that arena. We as a council are in the process of adopting the tax exemptions for renewable energy, and that is being drafted right now by legal counsel, and we expect to have the first reading on that this coming meeting. Is that correct,
Yeah.
Mr. McNutt?
I think so.
Yeah.
I believe so.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then we expect that have the first reading in December, the second reading in January, and then we'll be ready to go. So that's that on energy. Any questions or comments from the council or the reps? Nope. So I think in all of that, the takeaway is supporting renewable energy. There's a desire among the council and the community to do that. I believe it's also pretty well spelled out in the master plan.
Question?
Yes.
You cite the two bills here, which you've already taken position on. Were there any other bills that legal is going to look at relative to your letter of support, or?
Not related to energy at this time. And the reason why we were in opposition, well, we wanted the governor's veto to be sustained for SB 365 is because they included
The biomass.
No, the big deal breaker for this community was they were providing $8 million
Yeah,
subsidy
for-
to Wheelabrator.
Yeah, Wheeler, you're right, right.
Generating from waste.
Yeah, the waste incineration plant. And I think everybody in the community pretty much agreed with that. It was unfortunate it was included in that bill, because the documents clearly show that it was releasing quite a bit of lead into the air, and that's kind of, controversy to what we're trying to do as a community with regard to lead. So that's why we took the position we did.
So there's no other energy bills other than these two that you're
Well,
looking at?
They're done for this
Yeah, right.
legislative, but you've got so many LSRs coming into the 2019 legislative session, it's going to be a hot topic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, checking in with each other as they go through the process would be a good idea, because Claremont, this is also something you should know, Claremont is part of a municipal roundtable with regard to renewable energy. What we've done in Claremont has been spoken about in the state with regard to the solar array out at the wastewater treatment facility, our Energy Advisory Committee, our work moving forward on adopting the tax exemptions. So there's a real, momentum building here, and we should probably check in as these LSRs go through the system, because I don't know what the details are in the LSRs.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So it's going to be less of a general, your letters that you're putting together?
We will probably, I'll know more how to phrase that letter once I see what the bills actually are. They're just
okay.
placeholders right now.
Yeah, work in progress, basically.
But I can tell you at this point that the council has supported, progress towards renewable energy. That's been demonstrated in setting up the Energy Advisory Committee and the RSA for the tax exemption.
I just wanted to mention that aside from the very progressive work that the municipality has been doing towards renewable energy, Claremont is also very fortunate that a number of private renewable energy enterprises are looking to locate here, including what's proposed to be one of the largest solar arrays in the state. So renewable energy is obviously going to be very important going forward, but it could particularly be very important for Claremont.
Anything else on that? Okay. HB 1706. This is going to come up again in looking at the LSRs. I don't know if you followed this issue at all, but Lake Sunapee does not have a public boat launch. And by statute, that's a requirement for any body of water over 10 acres. The criteria for a public boat launch is that it has to be open 24/7 and free to the public. And though there are towns that have boat launches, they don't meet that criteria. So that statute hasn't been fulfilled as far as Lake Sunapee is concerned. Claremont historically has frequented Lake Sunapee quite a bit. And we have, in past years, had resolutions supporting the development of wild goose as a public boat launch. We reiterated our support last year.
Yes, we did.
And this council's reaffirmed our commitment to that, our position on that. Newport did as well. The county commissioners did. So what has happened was the governor had set up a commission to study this issue. And they had issued a report, and one of their recommendations was to have Fish and Game divest itself of the wild goose property and look for other property. Well, many of us have attended various meetings, and the feasibility of acquiring a better site on Lake Sunapee is probably zero. On November 8th, the Council on Resource and Development, also known as CORD, met to discuss the Commission's recommendation to transfer that land to State Parks and Rec. And the Director of Fish and Game said he couldn't support that recommendation because this has been an issue that's been going on for almost 25 years, and nothing better has come up. But I'm curious as to, so Board has met. They're going to meet again. They heard from both the Fish and Game Commissioner as well as the Commissioner for State Parks and Rec, and it's going to be revisited again. I don't think they came to any conclusion. We, the council, had submitted a letter stating that what should be considered, if you're going to go in that direction, have a deadline. Let them look for another alternate property, but you have to have a deadline, because again, we're kicking the can down the road. We're not fulfilling the state statute, and we have people who have testified in numerous venues, whether at the state level or here, that they just can't put their boat in because they can't get through the crowds that are at Sunapee, or what's the other one? There's another one. But it's not a dead issue, because what is very curious in these LSRs is they're talking about expanding parking and perhaps dredging the stream, I think it's Chandler's Brook, that runs into Sunapee, and that may be a way to kind of push things in the direction of making the public state beach also the public boat launch. And if you go through all of the testimony, there were many, many, many reasons why having a public boat launch at the same place that you have a public swimming area is not an ideal situation.
Not wise.
So, but there are LSRs that are coming up on that issue, and I don't know if you have any questions for us. I think the council's pretty familiar with that issue with the boat launch.
Madam Chair, I'm very familiar with that issue because as a member of the Public Works and Highways Committee in 2017, we dealt with that in the capital budget, and our committee put that in the House version of the capital budget. We sent it to the Senate. The Senate took it out, and in the Committee of Conference in June was adamant it wasn't going to allow it. It nearly wrecked the capital budget. For those of you who don't know, the capital budget is the major, other than the operating budget, probably one of the most major pieces of legislation we pass every 2 years. It's bonding for construction of such state buildings as the Capitol, River Valley Community College, Monadnock Office Building. And unfortunately, those of us who supported Wild Goose, including then Representative Gene Chandler, who later became Speaker, just gave up because we needed a capital budget. The Senate, other than maybe one or two senators, were not putting Wild Goose in it, and including the senator from the area, Senator Ward, adamantly against it, and it was nearly a stumbling block to the entire capital budget. So we had to retreat. There was a bill filed by a representative, I think, around the Amherst region. It was considered. One reason I didn't sign on is because there are some legitimate safety issues, the roadway around the launch, which I tried to get my committee to deal with and amend the bill. They didn't want to deal with it. And some of the same people on my committee who are adamantly in favor of Wild Goose in the capital budget all of a sudden turned tail, and when it came to a final vote, ITL 17-2, myself and one other representative were the only ones voting in opposition. And I don't know, it's the fact that the governor was opposed to it, and several reps, including some reps on my committee, and I cannot, are adamantly opposed to it, swung the tide. So we can keep working on this issue. I know CORD, which I'm very familiar with because I'm a member of the House Senate Long Range Capital Planning and Utilization Committee, If CORE does anything about transferring the wild over to the state park system, it's got to come to us. And I expect to be on that committee again next term. And so I will do, if that happens, I will adamantly oppose that as a start. But obviously, that's a blocking action, but what we really need is to work on wild goose. But I'm going to be honest with you, I don't see, with the governor's opposition and some of the other reps I know, it's not going to be easy. I'll be blunt with you. And I don't know if the composition of the Senate and House have changed enough to reconsider it, at least this upcoming term. I'll be blunt with you. I've even thought of looking at setting up a study commission to at least look at the state beach. I'm not wild about putting a boat launch on the state beach, next to the state park, but that might be a start. At least it would add some boat launch parking spaces and facilities for Claremont residents and other areas. But I think wild goose is at least a few years down the road. I'll be blunt with you.
I don't disagree with you, Representative, but I think if I would suggest, especially the new ones, you're much more familiar with the issue, is to go to CORD, the Council on Resource and Development. You can go to their minutes and you can see the meetings and what was discussed, and it's very informative of where they're at. The issue for the Fish and Game Commissioner is he doesn't believe anything better is going to come up. But okay, if we want to do that, then at least put a time frame on it. Because if you don't, this is just, it's not going to go well. And there were plenty. The city manager and I are both at the last meeting at CORD where they took public comment, and there were plenty of people, not even in this area, who tried to go to Sunapee, went to the state park to put their boat in. They didn't have big craft, but they put their boat in as Chandler's Brook, and they got stuck. And so it's not even adequate for the smaller boats, never mind the bigger boats. So, and the state's not fulfilling their own law. So,
Comment?
yes.
I've seen in a number of places with adequate separation between beach and boat launches. It's not impossible, it has to be planned well and executed well, but it shouldn't be a knockdown, because that's an undesirable thing theoretically, but can be made safe. The other thing I was wondering about, if there were any secondary alternative sites that were considered that have any viability to them. I don't know. That's why I'm asking that. Does anybody know of that? A Plan B site, an alternative?
No, there is no.
There is none.
There's none.
No, there's no plan per se. I mean,
Unless you go eminent domain.
no, even the proponents of wild goose, they don't have a alternative site.
It's all or nothing. Okay.
Unless the state decides to do it through eminent domain.
So that's where we are on that issue. There is one other issue that I didn't put on this list, but it came to mind when I was reviewing the LSRs, and I am concerned about it. And then there are 3 LSRs that deal with the background checks for the school districts in their hiring process. And just so that you guys are aware of, this community spent 2 years trying to get the law changed to ensure that the superintendent had access to a full background check on a potential hire.
State and federal, right?
Yeah, we're still working on the federal. But before the law was changed, what the superintendent got in his background check from the state police, what he saw or she saw, were just those crimes that were outlined in state statute, and they had to be felonies. So if you had somebody who was considered to be hired into the school district and had in his record misdemeanors with regard to anything to do with misconduct, sexual misconduct, the hiring authority never got that information. So this community spent 2 years trying to get the law changed because we have had situations where people have been considerably injured because the hiring authority didn't have all of the information, and had they known the information, they wouldn't have made the hire. And so it took a lot of work and effort to change that law. Organizations to include I believe the state police organization even weighed in. I know former Chief Scott testified, and we were told at the state level that this is, if you can't get it through now, given the example that we were using as to why changing the law was so important, we'll never get it through. So we got it through, but now there's 3 LSRs that appear, because they're just placeholders, all they say is duty of superintendents regarding criminal history record checks relative to criminal background checks for education personnel and criminal records checks in the employer application process. And they are LSRs right now 0308, 0319, and 0332. I don't know what it means because there's no detail other than the title, but I would ask that the representatives do everything in their power to ensure that the work that we did to make this law a better law is upheld. And we are working with the federal delegation, so you know, to have it considered universal across the nation, because what happens is each state has their own set of laws with regard to this. And predators will go where it's, you know, there are less resistance. Any other thoughts?
That said it nicely.
So that's all I had as far as, you know, legislative priorities. Is there anything else that the council, the city manager would like to say that is outside of this list? Any questions that the representatives may have?
I do. Ryan, you spoke of industries looking for renewables coming into Claremont or coming into New Hampshire generally. Do you have
specifically.
Specifically.
Yeah.
Water, solar, what's the character of those? How many of them are you looking at that are interested?
Primarily solar. I believe we've not directly in Claremont, but we've had hydroelectric power in the area. But additionally, one of the other renewables that's been proposed for this area is the waste methane gas from landfills. That can also be used. And in our Sid Clark Industrial Park, there would be an opportunity to take waste methane gas from either composting or a landfill and create a dedicated pipeline to some of those companies there. But again, you know, that's a very capital-intensive thing to build up. So without usually some type of support or subsidy, it's very hard to get profitability in the first couple of years. So it's not an incentive to do it. It's an incentive for the off-takers, but again, it's a very large capital outlay for the person installing the stuff to put it in. So, but it holds a lot of potential. So solar and waste landfill methane gas.
Anything else? Yes.
Did you want to speak to RSA 673:7 about planning board members serving on other boards?
Yeah, that was next.
Okay.
Yeah. So nothing further on our legislative priorities? No. Okay. So thank you for that segue. Some time ago, the assistant mayor and I are both on the planning committee. And some time ago, we were talking about planning board members serving on other organizations within the community, and it whatever the conversation was, it sparked my thinking to review that statute. And yes, according to the statute, if you are a planning board member, you may not serve on any other organization in the city.
Yeah, the topic came up as we were forming the Energy Committee, and there were several members of the planning board that had already filled out the paperwork to become members of that committee, and they would have been good. But the law precluded that.
Right, thank you. So the problem is, in a city, even though we're a city, and the statute differentiates between cities and towns, you know, we are a city of 13,000 plus people, and there's a concern that if you have that kind of restriction, are you really serving yourself well? And is there a real need for that? So I contacted Cordell Johnston out of NHMA and asked him to do the research, because I couldn't understand why this differentiation. And that was put in your packet, and you have it as well, I believe. So there seems to be no reason, based on his research, that was done, other than it just happened over the course of times. One thing was changed, but not the other, and you have this difference on whether you're a city or town who can. So the question for the council first, before we provide guidance to the representatives, is, based on the research that was done, do you see any reason not to change the statute?
No. As a matter of fact, we're kind of derelict, perhaps, in our duties if we don't change the statute. You can look at communities like Derry and otherwise that are classified as a town larger than we are, and they don't have these same structures, you know, around them. So I think it's in our own best interest. We cry about being able to find good volunteers, and yet we have this precluding the group.
So is everybody okay then with asking for this change? Then we would request Representative Cloutier, since you're the only one currently sitting as a representative, if you could submit that as an LSR before the deadline.
Okay, this what you just talked.
Yeah.
Submit. Okay, this is the draft that I think you sent me an email on this. Okay, I will.
From Cordell?
I will do that. Yeah, I will do that. I'm going down Thursday.
We would much appreciate it.
Okay, and this is what the text again. So I'll submit it to Legislative Services and work with them on this. And I assume it's going to go to probably municipal and county government. So I'll try to keep you informed, you know, about when the hearing is, et cetera. And
That would be
obviously
great.
it would be helpful to members of you, maybe Madam Mayor, the city manager, and other affected citizens who want to come down and testify. That would be very helpful.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Question?
Yes.
In the body of that communication that you shared with us, Cordell could not find any explanation for the prohibition. And he goes on, there was a small amendment in 1937, but no significant change until 1969. 1969, the law was amended to create the distinction that now exists between towns and cities. Any rationale for, or is this something that just flew off the handle? Just as background.
I mean, I don't have a clear answer. My speculation would be that it's not until the beginning of the 1970s that a lot of zoning provisions were put in place across New Hampshire, and that's another land use. It's the appeals, in many cases, to decisions by the planning board. So I'm just thinking that, I mean, why they would restrict it to cities again, I don't know. Yeah.
The short answer is he could.
Conflict of interest because of the changes in zoning
But then
and
why
so
would you
forth.
only do it for cities and not towns? And although many towns might have elected planning board members, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. It makes no sense.
Yes, Councilor Fons.
In the draft that you're asking to be submitted, just the end of it, about, I didn't get a chance to look at RSA 672(7), but does that address the alternate member? It says that except no more than one appointed or elected member of the planning board shall serve on the Conservation Commission local governing body or local land use board. But I don't know how that lays out as far as, because currently it's the mayor, assistant mayor, and I serve as an alternate.
It just, in the statute, it says, in cities, appointed members shall not hold any other municipal office except that one of the appointed members may be a member of the zoning board of adjustment. Either one appointed member or one ex officio member may be a member of the Conservation Commission if one exists in the city. And either one appointed member or one ex officio member may be a member of the Heritage Commission, the Historic District Commission, the Agricultural Commission, the Housing Commission, or all four of such commissions that exist in the municipality. And all it says, and that was part 2 of the statute. Part 1, in the case of towns, any 2 appointed or elected members of the planning board may also serve together on any other municipal board or commission, except that no more than one member of the planning board shall serve on the Conservation Commission, the local governing body, or a local land use board as defined in RSA 672-7. So to answer your question, it doesn't talk about alternates in any part of the statute. So, Councilor Kier?
Well, then it just seems vague. You don't really have an answer, because if one person isn't there and he has to sit in, you technically have 3 people on your board.
Right.
No, I can only sit for the assistant mayor's seat.
Oh, okay.
But what I'm questioning though is if we're cleaning up the language or trying to, maybe we should add or ask that
Or alternate.
or alternate. But the way it reads now, it doesn't even address the fact of, like, the way that it's structured is the mayor is there and the assistant mayor is there. But that also is kind of vague in this language.
Yeah. So you might, if you could count, Representative Cloutier, if you could make a note about the possibility of adding alternate to that language.
Okay, because unfortunately, I don't have your printed copy.
Is an alternate appointed?
Yes.
Because it says no more than one appointed or elected, so therefore, if the alternate is appointed, that would satisfy being an alternate as well as somebody appointed, because you're being appointed as a sitting person or as the alternate. Would that not satisfy?
I don't know. To me, it's arguable, the fact that it's the part that where it connects it to the local governing body. Because right now there's 3 on the planning board from the local governing body. And it just pushes us into the gray area.
I see what you're saying.
So if you, I mean, I'll have to go through legislative services, so
Yeah, and they will, they'll look at it very carefully.
that was Mr. Johnston's suggestion.
So where would you want to end the language? You said in boldface type, appointed or elected. Should you add alternate somewhere before or after this language? As I said, I'm looking at your proposed proposed bill.
I think what would be best, because we're not legal counsel,
Okay.
is Counselor Kolowski, can you just send your question to Representative Cloutier, and he can have that question considered in the discussion when he meets with the legislative services folks?
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah, okay, maybe I'll get together with Counselor briefly after the meeting.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Just
Anything else?
to recap the thought on my question of rationale, how this thing developed, just to bring this out, like Cordell wrote, that neither he nor I or anyone else I have spoken to can think of any reason to have a different rule for cities than for towns. My guess is that someone convinced the legislature in 1969 that small towns were having trouble finding enough volunteers.
Right.
So, and it's important that we know the rationale or lack thereof so we can make a case.
But you've got all the information there
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
So, our request is just that we
Appreciate
get the
that.
LSR in before the deadline. So 2 quick items. We have 6 minutes left before the planning board meets. The council had received through Doré a message from me about creating, the Conservation Law Foundation wanting to create a cohort of communities that are actively dealing with the childhood lead poisoning issue within their communities. And I need to get consensus from you this evening if that's something that you want Claremont to join. Because if that's the case, then we will be meeting to work on what entities should be represented in this cohort for Claremont. So I'd like to hear from the council as if you're okay with us joining that cohort.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody opposed, I should say?
It fits with the work that you've been doing and others have been doing over the past year or two.
Okay, because we have a deadline of December 1st to respond to some questions. So if it's okay with the council, then I'm happy to continue the work that I've been doing with this issue and act as the council's representative on that team representing Claremont. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. And then the last thing is I've had several counselors ask me about meeting with Mr. McQueen to discuss his report. So I spoke with both him and legal counsel. Both are available this week, any night this week. Obviously, because of posting requirements, we're looking at Wednesday or Thursday. But the legal counsel's advice was to have a non-public meeting, you have to have a meeting, go into non-public, speak, and have the council have the opportunity to speak directly with Mr. McQueen. So I need to know what night.
I would move Thursday, personally.
Thursday?
But that would also mean that we can't have a policy
That's
committee
okay.
meeting. Okay.
You're excused.
Thursday works? Is that okay with everybody? Okay. And then that's all I have.
What time?
Oh,
I'm setting up a meeting on Thursday at what time?
I would think because people have to drive in from far away, 6 o'clock. Is 6 o'clock okay with the council? Here?
6 is fine here.
Okay. All right, 6 o'clock here. Thursday night. Okay? Anything else? Or we've got 3 minutes for the representatives.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes, thank you for representing us on these issues. Thank you for volunteering to be again a member of the House of Representatives. And how would you like us to pass along this information and what we've discussed to the others that could not be here? Or there's only one. I
Yes,
guess the
Senator Hennessy. And
Yeah.
See.
I don't know, if you've got Bore's taking minutes, maybe submit the minutes to her. I mean, I can talk with Senator Hennessy later, but
Okay,
I'll obviously, in the bill that you want me, I will add Senator Hennessy as one of the co-sponsors along with my fellow Claremont representatives. So I'll keep her in the loop on that issue, but I assume, I don't know, the other issues, I can't speak for her, but I'm sure she has some of the same concerns I have about a lot of them that we've discussed tonight. I'm not sure about how she feels about Wild Goose, though. But the others, I think, the voucher bill, Education Freedom Savings Account, and the retirement system, I think she would be supportive of. And I'm taking a little bit of a leap here, but I think I can know her mind pretty well on those issues.
okay. Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, second. The motion was made by Sister Damon, seconded by Councilor Keir. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned.